Hello everyone, I'm Andre Bailey with Rethinking Homelessness. Wanted to just get going with the webinar. Thank you guys so much for signing up and being interested. We got over 1,700 mayors, county leaders, and others who have joined this webinar. Very huge response. We do webinars all the time for leaders. This is the largest webinar we've ever done. Again, I'm Andre Bailey. I am the head of an organization called Rethinking Homelessness. You can find us at rethinkinghomelessness.org. And we're going to dive in. We're going to take 1 hour of your time, and we're going to be looking at and helping you look at how you can build an eviction continuum in your community, how you can address this coming eviction crisis. We're going to take 60 minutes. We're going to get you guys out of here in 1 hour, but we want to dive in right now and talk to you a little bit about how your community, mayors, county leaders, sheriffs, judges, leaders around America. We have 1,700 different leaders represented on this webinar. We want you to know how you can help those in your community with evictions. So again, Rethinking Homelessness, this is what we do. We help leaders around America work on homelessness. We do webinars, we do training for leaders, and last year we talked to thousands of leaders around America. So, this is what we do. Just want to start by telling you that this 1 hour webinar is not meant to give you everything. It's meant to get you started on this eviction crisis that your community is facing. I want to encourage you. We're going to have 9 weeks starting in September where we're going to coach you on every area of how to build an eviction program for your community, using data, creating systems for eviction. You can find all this on our website, but we want to help you. There's an eviction crisis coming. Everyone listen to me and hear me well. There's an incredible eviction crisis coming to America. The greatest crisis we've ever seen since the Great Depression. And your community is going to feel the impact of it. We want to help you and help you help your people in need. Also remember, my team is telling me we have a fact sheet on the website with data and statistics on the eviction crisis. All the slides are going to be available on rethinkinghomelessness.org, and we have program info, so you can find all kinds of information on rethinkinghomelessness.org. So let me start by saying there is an eviction crisis coming. Is there an eviction crisis coming? We know that there is. So here's a few stats on the eviction crisis. More than 40% of renters are at risk of eviction in 29 states. This is the one that probably should keep you up at night and probably does keep you up at night. 1 in 3 tenants didn't pay rent between April, June, or July of this year in your community. An estimated 11 million evictions will be filed in the next 4 months, totaling $21.5 billion in rent just over those few months. So these are some stats. We've got all kinds of stats. I don't have to tell you this. You guys know an eviction crisis is coming because of COVID-19. And many of you know that this country already had huge issues with homelessness and evictions before COVID-19. So an eviction crisis is coming. We have this map here that we're going to have on our website as well that shows you the evictions per state. There's different evictions per state. Different states are at risk at different levels. But when you add it all together, again, we are looking at hundreds of potentially hundreds of families, thousands of families in your community at risk. So who is most at risk of eviction? This is important, most at risk, and we're going to get into the meat of how your community can build a new system for evictions. But who's most at risk? We think this is important. Many of you have been...
Sound isn't working.
There's a red light on. Many of you have been working on...
Take a minute.
On the, the red light on the camera's on.
Should be working. Just say something.
Guys, give us 1 second. We're having a little bit of an audio issue. 1 second, audio issue, guys. 1 second. Yeah, the red light's on the camera.
Yeah,
Is it the right mic?
yeah, it is.
Undo it and then do it again.
Yeah. Try to see something.
Do
Yep.
a sound check. It's not coming up.
Guys, give us 1 second. The sound is not working.
Yeah, you put it out, or I'll get the other.
What happened?
Oh, God, I can't.
1 second, everyone. The sound is not working.
Was it not working the whole time?
No, it cut off just now. Right when I said it. I let them know.
Yeah, let them know. 1 second. The sound isn't
No one has
working.
dropped off.
Just give us 1 minute.
Here, hold this for a second.
Same
Are we back on? The lights, the white light's on again. Sound on? Sound on? We good? Asking my team. Sorry, guys. In the new Zoom world, we had a little technical difficulty. Make sure everyone, if you can't hear, make sure to tell us you can't hear. But my team, is the sound working again?
Should be.
Sounds on? Alrighty. So, very important. Forgive me for the delay, but let's talk about the fact that in a time when social justice is an important conversation in your community, social justice, it's important to know that 1 in 5 renters who are behind on rent during the pandemic, that it's going to impact certain communities at a much more are going to be much more challenged. You've got Black, Latinos, so just good to know. We're going to give you all this information, but it's good for you to see that this is not going to hit everybody equally. It's going to be incredibly important that you target your resources. We're going to talk to you about how fair isn't fair when you look at resources. So again, looking at people of color, particularly Black and Latino Americans, they're going to make up 80% of those who are facing eviction right now. Low-income women are very high risk of eviction, and early interventions should be thought about for the highest risk populations. Let's talk for just a second, because many of you are comparing this to the 2008 crisis. Many people are talking about the 2008 crisis. Here's the thing to note, that the rate of evictions and the volume of evictions that we saw in 2008, that is nothing compared to what we're going to see now. Remember that the 2008 crisis was a mortgage crisis, a crisis that lasted 18 months, 2 years, rolled out very, very slowly. Because of COVID-19, because of the dramatic loss of jobs in America and in your community, and because of the fact that we have eviction moratoriums that are really the only thing keeping evictions down, 2008 saw many Americans at risk over a long period of time. We're going to see Americans at risk all at once in the next few months. That's why it's going to be different. So if some in your community are trying to compare this to 2008, and saying, well, we didn't need a lot of rental assistance then, this is not 2008. So what can your community do? Again, thank you for joining our webinar on the eviction crisis. What can you do? Number one, the goal, flattening the curve on evictions in your community. We used this reference on purpose because many of the questions that we got were questions that had to do with affordable housing and questions that had to do with anti-poverty programs. Listen, those are very, very, very important. Those issues are important and important to us. But right now, your job as someone working on homelessness, someone working on housing, a mayor, a county leader, a sheriff, a judge, your job, you need to be thinking about flattening the curve on the eviction crisis. You guys all remember Dr. Fauci talking about how we could on the COVID-19 virus, we had to try to bring this curve down so that we could prepare as a nation in our hospital system, work on vaccines, etc. Really, it's the same idea when it comes to your community and the eviction crisis. You need to build a system that's going to keep people in their homes as long as possible. And we're going to tell you how to do that right now. But we're going to focus, again, just on 3 or 4 areas in this webinar. We want you to go to Rethinking Homelessness. Starting in September, we're going to have a 9-week program that many of you need to be a part of. But number one, here's what we're going to talk about today. Number one, how do you develop your resource strategy? Mayor, county commissioners, leaders out there, one of the most important things Rethinking Homelessness can tell you on this webinar is you do not have the money in your community to pay for this solution. Just last week, I was hearing about our friends in Indianapolis, our friends in Austin, other communities in the United States, many of you on this webinar, who have put out historic amounts of local money, 15 million, 20 million. There's an initiative in Orange County, Florida, about $20 million of money for rental assistance. I've got to tell you, that will not be enough money. At the end of the day, your community needs federal stimulus dollars, starting with learning again how to use some of the money you got in the CARES Act, which I think is a great starting point for resources. How can you take some of the CARES Act dollars you were given and allocate those now for rental assistance? Again, Orange County, Florida is doing that. Heard about a $20 million CARES Act allocation. Great idea, but it won't be enough money, although it's a great start. So secondly, when it comes to getting resources for your community, we're going to have to work together and look at whether it's what's called the HEROES Act right now, future stimulus needs. In my opinion, and we're going to be sending you an email about how to be an advocate in Congress with your senators, with your governors, there needs to be at least a $100 to $150 billion, you heard me correct, $100 to $150 billion that Congress passes in a stimulus plan that then goes through probably the ESG formula directly to cities and counties all over America. But I don't want to depress you to start this, because we're going to encourage you over the next 9 to 10 weeks to get going with a plan to address this in a different way. But at the end of the day, you're going to need federal stimulus dollars, and we're going to have to work together to advocate for those dollars. Just like with unemployment, you didn't have enough money in your community, we're going to have to really advocate for resources. Here's something else very important from a resource standpoint. Remember that the Fair Housing Act will not allow you to target resources by any of the protected class: race, color, disability, familiar status, sex, national origin. So targeting, when you start getting resources, is going to have to be done through some pretty creative ways, and we're going to talk to you about that right now. Another incredibly important aspect of resource development is continuing the dialogue. Mayor, county leader, judges, sheriffs, you guys need to be talking with your governors, talking locally about extending moratoriums. Communities must work together with leaders to have a conversation about moratoriums. The amount of evictions that will come quickly in September, October, November, December if moratoriums are lifted without a strategy. So again, what do you do to start? We have to look towards federal money and using CARES Act money. Some of the budget that you've already been given through the CARES Act you can use for rental assistance, and then you got to keep those moratoriums in place. And with a plan, though, guys, we can't keep the moratoriums forever. There's been this whole concept about cancel the rent, and we're just going to cancel rent and not make people pay rent ever that they owe. That is not a solution. Your landlords, a lot of them are mom and pop landlords that they themselves will go financially under. Those houses will go in foreclosure. So canceling the rent's not an option. But keeping the moratoriums in place until a solution is put together is what we have to look at. By the way, if you have a question, go ahead and go into the chat box. You can ask a question right now. We got a question we're going to put up from Dina in Groveland, Florida. Dina asks, a lot of people lost their jobs and couldn't pay their rent. How is the CARES Act money going to help them pay what is owed? And then Greg in Scottsdale, Arizona asked, will there be continued federal policies and funding to assist families and individuals facing eviction? So I will tell you, the CARES Act did not allocate an adequate amount of money for rental assistance. So although you can use, Dina, some of that CARES Act money, there has not been a specific stimulus package for your community to get the rental assistance that you need. Again, start running the math on this. If your community has 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 rental households at risk, you're talking about, for the smaller communities, hundreds, for the bigger community, thousands or tens of thousands of people that need rental assistance. Or they're going to be facing homelessness. Hey guys, one thing to remember here, please, if you're working with mayors, if you're a mayor out there watching this, county leaders, sheriffs, remember, the people that are at risk of being homeless are people that have never been homeless before. These are folks who, young families with children. These are senior citizens. These are vulnerable populations who have never been homeless before. That's why we're going to need resources through the CARES Act, but very limited money, Dina. Federal policies are going to have to be how we get the resources for this, Greg. Your community in Scottsdale is already struggling. You're not going to be able to fill the bill for this. Just like you couldn't fill the bill, pay your own bill for the unemployment and needed the CARES Act for that. So let's dive into, in my opinion, the most important thing you're going to hear today. Creating a new system of evictions. Let's take a minute, and this is hard to read, but this is how the old eviction process works in your community. There's a problem because the rent isn't being paid, there's agreement and it's not being paid. Landlord and tenant try to resolve it, it doesn't work. It's filed with the courts, and an eviction notice is sent, the landlord and tenant go to court, and then a judge decides an eviction proceeding is finalized, and then the sheriff's department puts people a set out, as it's called. This is the eviction process in almost all of your communities. This eviction process, if you don't hear anything that I say today, if you don't hear anything I say today, please hear this. This eviction process will lead to absolute doom when it comes to homelessness in your community. This eviction process, because of the volume and who is being evicted, will no longer work. And we want to coach you on what we are recommending is a new eviction process. We're calling it a new system, an eviction continuum, a community work on evictions. And it looks a little bit like this. I'm going to throw this all at you. Again, we're going to be covering this in depth in our 9-week program starting in September. You build the proper community leaders, mayors, county leaders. City, county, you got to work together. Sheriffs, judges, all your nonprofit leaders, United Way, continuums of care. You build a governing group of leaders that then bring together all existing evictions and use the court system as the starting point for a new eviction clearinghouse. This might read like an eye chart, and we'll explain this, I think, in one of the first weeks in September. But now, instead, when evictions come, normally where they would come to the courthouse, and then the tenant is on their own versus the court system. What we're now saying is an eviction clearinghouse. Forgive our terminology, it's the best terminology we could come up with. You might call it something else. But an eviction clearinghouse is created where the county, the city, partner with the judicial system and judges, the judges that handle evictions, the sheriff's department, homeless providers, and out of that, all evictions go in and mitigation then happens from there. The tenants and the landlords have the ability to bring to this eviction clearinghouse an eviction before it goes to the courthouse. By the way, you're going to have to build a new database on homelessness tied to evictions. The best way to know someone's going to be evicted, unfortunately, is going to be that first filing. We want to try to avoid that, but if someone files, that's going to go to the courthouse and go to this new eviction clearinghouse. Secondly, this eviction clearinghouse, which might be run inside of the county, might be run inside of the city. You might have to hire a staff to run this inside of a continuum of care or United Way. So this is going to be a group of people that answer to the city, county, the governing body. Let me pause right there and just say this is so important. Andre, you keep saying city and county. Why do they get to make all the decisions in this if you're someone out there that is not part of the city and county? Because the money that's going to come down through future stimulus packages is going to be, in my opinion, ESG dollars that go directly to cities and counties using the ESG framework. So cities and counties are going to have the money, but they're going to need to partner together with the judicial system. And then here's what they're going to look to do. They're going to look to try to settle with landlords. You're going to have to engage landlords in your community and convince landlords. We're going to show you a formula on how to do that in just a minute. But you're going to try to settle and keep tenants inside of their apartment. This is about keeping people in their apartment as long as possible. Again, flatten that curve and buy more time for the economy to recover, for COVID-19 to pass by, hopefully, in the months to come. But the most important thing that the eviction clearinghouse with a big bag of money could do, small money right now, big money later, is settle and get the landlord and tenant right side up. The second thing that could happen, though, is if that settlement doesn't work, how do we not let these individuals, these families, enter into the homeless system? Because guys, mayor, county leader, others, how do you send people to a homeless shelter? They've never been to a homeless shelter before, and it's COVID-19. We cannot send people to the old homeless system anymore, not in the COVID-19 world. We don't want to send young families, seniors, others, children to a homeless shelter anyways, but that is not a traditional option. So if the settlement doesn't work, you got to look at putting people in hotels, having a fund to put someone on a temporary basis somewhere other than a congregate shelter. And then again, this eviction clearinghouse would look at all the other needs to keep this family, this individual out from being on the streets. Do they need utility assistance? Can you work with the utility company in the community to not turn lights off? Childcare, so many different mental health needs. So this eviction clearinghouse, we're going to go into a few more slides on this and give you some more details about it in just a minute. But let me give you, I want you to hear from me, let me give you the biggest mistake I think communities are making right now when it comes to rental assistance. County leaders, city leaders, United Ways, continuums of care, sheriffs, judges, all of you out there, you start getting resources from the CARES Act. You start getting some local money you've already had in savings. You get more stimulus dollars. The biggest mistake, the most important thing from a mistake standpoint I want to tell you is this, that giving this money out fair is absolutely not the fair thing to do. And here's what I mean by that. Many communities are getting allocations of money. They're putting that money online and they're doing first come, first serve. I saw a community program recently where they're doing a random lottery for who gets the money. Guys, hear me and hear me well. This money is going to be so limited. The money you have is so limited. So you cannot be random when you put money out, and you can't just put it out on an online portal and let first come, first serve. Instead, leaders must employ huge targeting systems. Targeting. Look at the person next to you and say, we got to target these resources. Targeting resources for vulnerable households and allocating resources to those in need. Let me give you some ideas of how you can do that. So number one, the targeting formula. This is a good thing, mayor, to county leaders, to give to your county commission, your city council, the leaders working on the eviction crisis. This is what we call NIIC. These are the 4 ways that you need to be targeting resources in this new system. Number one, targeting by neighborhood. We were doing research over the past few weeks on the most effective neighborhood targeting. And what we found is this, that you will probably find that of all the geographic areas, all the zip codes in your community, most of your evictions will come from less than 15% of all of the zip codes in your community. So neighborhood targeting is so essential to how you're going to get resources out. Remember, guys, remember again, you can't target by race, you can't target by age, you can't target by gender. These are things that fair housing doesn't allow. But those often are people that are most at need. So you want to target by neighborhood, begin looking at data in your community on what neighborhoods are the most cost burdened. That's another important way of thinking about targeting. Who is paying 50%, 60%, 70% of their income before COVID-19 towards rent? Those are the people, and those neighborhoods have to be targeted, number one. Number two, income. Income. Look at total household income, and somehow you need to create a portal. Somehow you need to create a system that gets people of low income more help, or ultimately the first line of defense when it comes to rental assistance. Income. Number three, and this is one that might surprise some of you, industry. We need to look at industries that have been most hard hit by COVID-19 layoffs. So we had some folks on the webinar from Nevada. If you're in Nevada right now, and hi to our friends in Nevada, we know that many of you have seen tremendous layoffs in tourism, some of the transportation industries. We've seen huge layoffs. So you might want to target restaurants. Restaurants have been decimated. Bars have been decimated. So many of these industries might need a target when it comes to rental assistance. That's a good thing. That's fair. Again, I want to say what the previous slide said. You might be having a conversation about what's fair. Fair isn't putting this online and doing a random lottery. That is an absolute mistake that will hurt the people that need help. You need to target by neighborhood, income, industry, and now this one's important. COVID-19 risk factors. You absolutely can use the CDC guidelines to make sure targeting happens for seniors and for folks who are most at risk of sickness and death from COVID-19. And we're going to put all of these in the chat box. We're going to link you to the CDC guidelines if you don't have them. So we have a few questions right now. My staff's giving me some questions. But again, targeting. Angie had a question. Are these eviction process changes being suggested for non-payment related evictions? For example, will evictions for other lease violations continue to utilize existing processes? I'm going to get to that in just a second, Angie. And who is the mediator for this model? So those are really good questions. I want to address both of them quickly and just say this. Remember the golden rule, guys. Remember the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. The golden rule in America is he who has the gold makes the rules. So because the cities and counties are going to get the ESG funding and have the CARES Act funding, they need to create a partnership with the judicial system. They need to bring the business community in. They need to get sheriffs involved. Sheriffs do set-outs. They need to get United Way, the continuum of care, if it's a separate entity. All those players, get them involved, and then the cities and counties need to create this eviction continuum because they're the ones that have this resources. So because of that, that's a clear who has to be tasked with this? The person and people in your community with the money. That's the cities and the counties. And we're going to get into the next question in just a second. Another thing to remember when it comes to geography, that zip codes and neighborhoods are incredibly good for targeting. 30% of AMI or below, 50% severe cost burdened. Montgomery, Alabama, our friends in Montgomery County, found 66, listen to this stat, in Montgomery County, 66% of evictions occurred in a study that was done last year in 2 out of 66 counties. It's the same thing in your community. Evictions need to be targeted by neighborhood. We want to help you do that. Targeting resources by household income. This is a little bit more self-explanatory, but you want to go back and look at 2019. You don't just want to say, well, these people are unemployed, all of them are unemployed, give them all rental assistance. If someone had a low income in 2019. You want to take that into consideration. Many folks who are behind on their rent right now, but come from higher income brackets, and those people can self-correct. They can find help on their own. So targeting resources by industry, we talked about this. Central Florida, which is my home, decimated. The hospitality and tourism industry decimated. Communities like this might want to look at targeting industries with their system. That's going to be important to think about. And targeting COVID-19 risk factors, the CDC guidelines, so important, will allow you to work around the Fair Housing Act. You don't want to violate the Fair Housing Act, but it will allow you to look at vulnerable populations. You guys, you should really think about this just a second. When it comes to COVID-19, the virus, and when it comes to the eviction crisis COVID-19 created, they're similar in that they both target those that are already vulnerable. If you think about how as a society we're thinking about the medical side of COVID-19, we have to think of evictions the same way. If you were not vulnerable from eviction before, you're probably not going to be vulnerable now. But if you were one of that ALICE population that you guys have heard about, asset limited, income constrained and employed, that ALICE population United Way always talks about, those are the people that are most at risk of eviction, and COVID-19 also can help you target them. Question, and again, thank you so much. We've got 30 minutes left. Don't forget, we have on the website access to our 9-week program. We want to help you build this eviction continuum. We could see millions of Americans, children, seniors, homeless. We could see a wave of evictions, the likes of which we've never seen in American history. If your community doesn't have the resources and have a plan, we want to help you build that, and time is running out. So please, I'm begging you, take a look at our 9-week program. We want you to sign up for it, and we want to get you involved with us so your community can have a plan. You're going to learn from other communities doing this as well. A question from Karen, somewhere in the U.S. She lives in a rural community, a lot of rural communities on here today, asking how is it going to be different for rural communities than it is in Seattle or Miami or New York City, where in a rural community, not a lot of apartments, not a lot of shelters for people to go, not a lot of resources. Hey, rural communities, I want to say this to you and say it just really quickly and move on, but you need to hear this. On a normal in a normal America, your homeless problem is very different than big cities because of chronic homelessness. I don't have time to go into that. We did a big study on chronic homelessness and panhandling. It's on our rethinkinghomelessness.org website. But big cities have a completely different problem with homelessness than rural communities before 2020. In 2020, your small rural community, big cities, it's going to be the same problem. I get it. Some communities have less rental housing. Some communities have more shelters. But remember, the shelter system is not going to work. Guys, you can't put seniors, children, groups of people in congregate bunk bed warehouses. I don't think that's a good thing anyways, but you cannot do that in COVID-19 world. You already know that. I don't have to tell you that. So the old homeless system is going to struggle right now. So if your rural community doesn't have it, well, guess what? The communities that do have a big homeless system, they're not going to be able to use it the same way, number one. Number two, unless your community has no group of people that was income challenged before, at whatever level you had a population of people that were income challenged, they had challenges making their rent, they were cost burdened, at whatever level, this is a good way of thinking of it, whether you're a big community or a small community. Whatever level you have a percentage of cost-burdened people, those people are absolutely running out of financial and housing oxygen right now. Guys, we used to say all the time, oh my goodness, in my community, 30, 40, 50% are one paycheck away from the street. Well, what about 10 paychecks? That's what COVID has done to so many people. So rural community, you got to put a plan together. The same strategy will work. The resources are just smaller, and your problem, God willing, will be smaller. So again, I was just mentioning, you gotta be able to not let people hit the homeless system. And I am recommending using hotels as a huge plan B option. Because if a landlord decides when moratoriums are lifted to evict people, you can take some of this CARES Act money, you can take some of the next stimulus package, and you can look at getting folks into landlords and getting them into hotels if landlords don't work with you, and getting wraparound services there. I think landlords will work with you. We have a scenario I want to go through in just a minute on how I think you can get landlords to settle with you. Again, remember the targeting formula is important, but you have got to get this money out fast when it starts hitting your ESG bank accounts, cities and counties. So you're going to have to you got to put this system together, because you don't have, if you have, let's just say your community, your county has a human services department, and you got 7 people that work in the human services department, and they normally handle 100, 500 family contacts per month. What in the world are you going to do when 5,000 or 50,000 people reach out all in 1 month? That is not something you're going to be able to handle. You're going to have to invest money into a system, lots of new staffing, that eviction continuum, because this money's got to get out, and you got to be willing to make mistakes. We had a question that was asked yesterday. What about people who are going to take advantage of the system? Just like the unemployment system, the CARES Act put out billions of dollars in unemployment benefits. People took advantage of it, but a lot of people got help. So you're going to have to be willing to make mistakes. Question. This is an important question, and we got 20 minutes left. This is a very important question. Phyllis in Albany asked, will landlords be required to accept a payment plan for the past due rents for up to 12 or 18 months or more? Phyllis is asking, what if landlords don't want to work with you? Let's talk about that right now. And so the third part of this webinar talks about, again, why you have to build not only a system, city, county, judges, the court system's the front line of this new system. In our 9-week program, we're going to teach you how to do this. But you got to build a collaborative, because guess what, Phyllis? You can't make a landlord do anything. You cannot. There is no discussion right now about mandating landlords to take their personal property and do something with it they don't want to do. It's unconstitutional. It's not possible for that to happen. But here's what can happen. And cities and counties, mayor, you're critical out there. County leaders, you're critical out there. Sheriffs, judges, you're critical. Because you, like you've done on other crises, can bring your community together. You can bring philanthropy, criminal justice, your faith organizations. You can bring healthcare, all the government leaders, education, nonprofits. You can bring landlords from the business community together to start looking at how we work with landlords. Because here's where Phyllis is right. If we can't figure out how to work with landlords, this isn't going to work. But we have a strategy on how you do that. Remember this. When you build a collaborative, I'm going to talk about landlords in a second. You heard me say that the criminal justice system is kind of the front lines, because that's where evictions go. So you got to make sure people have legal representation. You got to build a financial assistance, rental assistance war chest. You got to have the wraparound services, right? We talked about that. We talked about this eviction clearinghouse and how you want to settle. The most important thing that could happen is this settlement between the landlord and the tenant, right? This is what we're saying that settlement might look like. So let's just say hypothetically, we're going to cover this at length in our 9-week program, but let's just say hypothetically, your community has small rural community, and you have $5 million for rental assistance. A big community, you have $50 million. I've heard numbers for some of the largest communities in America. They're going to need upwards of $200 to $500 million for rental assistance in 2020 and 2021. Don't worry about the number. Let's just say your community has a meaningful number to invest in keeping people off the streets by paying landlords. You have got to figure out how to get landlords to settle for a 60 to 75, I like 60% of the past due rent. You heard me right. City, county, you cannot, in my opinion, go and give landlords all of the money that they're owed. You won't be able to do that. The money won't last. But here's what we're recommending. We will give it to you more in the 9-week program. We're recommending what I call a 3 and 3, a 4 and 4, a 5 and 5, whatever the number is, a rental settlement program with landlords. And here's just a little bit of what that looks like. If you're going to give a landlord money for past due, well, actually I want to go back to the second. So landlords and tenants, there's an eviction process. It goes to the court system, or it goes to this eviction clearinghouse that really the court system's baked in the middle of this. If the landlord is owed, think about this. Most landlords right now are owed April, May, June, July, and August. When you hear me talk about the 5 and 5 settlement, it's because most landlords are owed 3 to 5 months rent, back rent right now. If that landlord goes through the court system or your eviction process and says, I'm not settling, I'm kicking these people out, right? Well, guess what? That landlord has every right, Phyllis, to do that. But the landlord then gets $0. Zero. The landlord can try to sue that tenant, but I'm telling you, that landlord knows they're getting $0 if they just kick that person out. That person has a COVID-19 related eviction. It's not their fault. So this is what we're saying. If a landlord, but that's, by the way, real quick, but that's not fair to the landlord. The landlord didn't do anything wrong. Those that are trying to villainize landlords, these are mom and pop people trying to pay their bills as well. So here's what we're saying on the settlement side. We're saying that a landlord knows that for every month they're behind in rent, that's money that, unless something happens, they're going to never get that money. But what we're worried about is not paying the past rent. If you pay the past rent and then the person still gets evicted, that's totally a waste of resources. I'm sorry. So here's what we want to do. We want to create a system that goes to landlords and says, we'll pay if your tenant's 4 months behind, we'll pay those 4 months, but we also want to pay 4 months ahead. But we're going to pay you 60 to 70% of the total for all those months, and we're going to write you a check. So now think about this. I just want to run some simple math here. If a landlord is owed 5 months rent at $1,000 a month, that's $5,000. April, May, June, July, August, and then we want to keep the person September, October, November, December, 5 more months. September, October, November, December, January, 5 more months. That's 10 months. If the landlord settles the past debt for 60% and they allow only 60% to be paid for the next 5 months, that landlord just got a $10,000 payment, where in a best case scenario, if that landlord evicts that tenant, they would have took another month at best, only October, November, December. So the best case scenario is that landlord would have got $3,000 if they could have moved a new person in, which is hard in a COVID-19 environment. So your settlement strategy, and this is just one we're recommending, you might come up with your own. The settlement strategy allows you to get almost double, if you can do it properly, double the resources out to the community, and it works with landlords to tell them, listen, we can't pay you 100% because we got to keep these folks from being out on the streets. So we're going to work much more in depth with you on how to work with landlords and how to ultimately launch a pilot program. We have 15 minutes left, but here's what we're recommending. Cities, counties, my heart is aching right now because I want to reach through this webinar screen and just grab you, if being a little emotional here, but I just want to reach through and just say, listen, if your city and your county continues doing evictions through the old model, it's just going to go to the judge. The judge is going to try to the court system is going to try to figure it out. These people are going to have to navigate a system on your own. I promise you, I'm not trying to scare you, but I promise you, your community is going to face a tragedy. This is a crisis right now, but this crisis will turn into a tragedy where families, children, the elderly, vulnerable populations are on the streets at a number that is unimaginable. You can't let that happen. So we're encouraging you, this is the fourth part of our webinar, to look at bringing together in the next few weeks a pilot program where you're going to look, and you might do this a little differently. I will tell you that's okay, but the principles apply. You need to build a new system of how you're doing evictions. It's got to start again in the court system, because the court system is where the rubber meets the road on evictions. This is a rental crisis. This is not a mortgage crisis. So it's not like 2008. You got to look at using the court system, partnering with judges, partnering with law enforcement, partnering with United Way, partnering with the current continuum of care, homeless system, and faith community, partnering with landlords, city and county. You got to help run this. You're going to have the money when it comes. You have currently the CARES Act money. You're going to have the ESG funding. City and county, you got to lead. Mayor, you got to lead on this. But once you pull this together, you pull together a new system of evictions, you pull together a collaborative. Mayor, county commissioners, county leaders, people will listen to you. Pull the business community together. Pull leaders together and start looking at targeting with the resources you have immediate relief for those in need, but not in a shotgun, fair system without targeting. Practice a new way of using the court system and direct targeting. Remember, targeting is neighborhood, income, industry, and COVID-19. That's the targeting. So look at working on this with your CARES Act money that you can allocate, and probably some of your general revenue dollars, so that you can have a system that's up and running when the HEROES Act or whatever stimulus is going to, there's a big conversation. We've got lots of questions on what President Trump's executive orders, when is Congress going to put out a new stimulus? These are things we don't know. But I promise you, this is my opinion, in an election year, the president, Congress, all Republicans, Democrats, they're going to have to figure out how to get 50, 100, 150 billion dollars to your community, to the nation, and that allocated part of that to your community through the ESG process. And that's going to happen, but you can't wait till then to start working on this. So launch a pilot program. I want to answer a few questions before we go, but this is so important. Our 9-week program, we do coaching on homelessness all over America. We have traditional coaching programs that we do data reports and we build community plans. We're not doing much of that right now. Those programs are absolutely full right now. We have waiting lists for those. We're encouraging you and other leaders on this to look at our 9-week eviction program that we're offering, where starting September 2nd, the first week, we're going to help your community use a new data strategy. We're going to have a webinar, private webinar for you to, we're going to show you how to build the data strategy. Week 2, how to build all this system for eviction. We're talking about how can you build that? How does it work? What are the legalities of it? Building the collaborative. How do you reach out to your business community leaders? How do you reach out to landlords? I'm recommending, for those of you that have a strong United Way, have the United Way or the continuum of care be the arm that reaches out to the business chamber and landlords. That's a group that could be very powerful in this. We're going to be doing, by the way, a special United Way webinar on the eviction crisis in a few weeks. We're also going to be doing another eviction webinar for COCs outside of this, but how do you build the collaborative? Week 4, September 23rd, working with landlords. How do you create this settlement strategy, bring landlords to the table? How do you really target resources? Guys, please, I'm begging you, do not shotgun money out on websites and put them, there's so many, indulge my soapbox a minute, but we sit around and we talk all the time about barriers to entry and social justice and how things aren't fair, and then we have an eviction crisis and we just throw money on a website and say it's first come, first serve. Guys, that is going to absolutely not target the people that need this the most. Please, please, look at how you're targeting. We're going to help you do that October 14th, September 30th, strengthening your homeless system. Your homeless system is critical, but it can't function on the eviction crisis the way it functioned before. Not in a COVID-19 world with no vaccine currently out there. Strengthening the court system and law enforcement. I got a lot of sheriffs out there who say, we want to lead on this. Sheriffs, we can show you how to do that. We can show you how to lead, because at the end of the day, Sheriff, if you're on this webinar, you're the one doing the set out. If the mayors, county leaders, judges in the community, we know they're going to step up. But if they don't, you've got to put these families on the street, Sheriff. It's most of the sheriffs in communities that do these set outs. There's sheriffs saying, I'm not going to do that. And so sheriffs, we're going to talk to you about judges and law enforcement and how they got to be the front line. We're going to do that October 14th. Community eviction wraparound services is going to be October 21st. And then we're going to look at helping you launch your new program October 28th. We've got all of this on our website, rethinkinghomelessness.org. So we do have some other questions. My staff's giving me questions. You can go ahead and put a question in the chat box. I've got a question. I think this is from Kansas. Let me grab that from you. Okay. So this is actually a great question. Daniel asks, how do you work with tenants who are bad actors? People who they might, again, have, are trying to game the system. They might be trying to take advantage of this COVID-19 crisis. I would tell you, and this is hard for some people to hear, but you're going to have to be willing to make some mistakes and get money into the hands of a few folks who might not need the resources. If you end up giving a handful of rental assistance payments to people that have tricked you into doing that, but while doing so, you helped 95% of the vulnerable not experience homelessness in your community, I think that is a job well done. So again, for most of you out there looking to create a system that really is effective and fair and compassionate, but also just, you're not going to be able to be perfect. You're going to have to accept the fact that some people are going to game the system, but most people out there are really in need because of COVID-19. Just a few more questions. Again, on the 9-week program, we've got some folks asking about that. Listen, we want you in this program. We've got a link set up. Go to rethinkinghomelessness.org. You can click on there, and there's a simple little box you fill out. I'd click on that right now. We'll send you information on the 9-week program. We're going to coach you through this because you need help, and we want to help you. Question, what about renters in higher income zip codes who are not high income, but they have more affordable units, etc.? What this person's asking is, what about someone who could fall through the cracks because they live in a neighborhood where the income's higher, but they live in a duplex or something, and they are not a high income? This is why you want to have, and write this down, you want to have 4 criteria to how you target this. Neighborhood is just one of them. Income is the other. Industry, and then 4th, are they COVID CDC, are they on COVID CDC guidelines for being in danger? So you could use that. That's why you need, by the way, think about this question. The eviction court, the typical eviction court, is not set up to process any of those questions. So this is why you need, again, this is why you gotta have this new way that of landlords and tenants, you've got thousands, many of you guys have thousands of potential evictions. They've got to go to a new eviction clearinghouse, but remember, it's gotta be centered around your judicial system. You can't kick your judges out. You can't change how eviction happens. You can't say cancel the rent. So judges are going to have so many potential evictions, but then your city, county, landlords, faith community, United Way, homeless services, all your leaders are going to work together to try to settle using, neighborhoods, income, industry, etc. You're going to try to settle those, or you're going to make sure these people don't hit the streets. So that's why this is so important. Mike has a big question. Mike says, our community has large areas of mom and pop fourplexes. Is there any available programs to assist owners with mortgage payments. So this is a great question. We've got 3 minutes left. Thank you guys so much for joining the webinar. Remember, I'm going to answer this question, then we're going to get you guys off the webinar and get you to log on to our 9-week program. So Mike asked a question. Think about this. Mike's like, how do you, and city leaders, county leaders, sheriffs, judges, thank you for joining, but I really want you to hear this. Mike is asking, how do we get money to assist those holding the mortgages, right? Especially if they're being held by mom and pop, small duplex, mortgage holders, owners. But think about this. If our community, if our federal stimulus dollars get turned over to your community, city and counties, and then that money doesn't go directly, remember this guys, remember this. I don't know if I mentioned this and maybe I need to mention it. These payments will not go to the tenants. These payments go directly to the landlords. So, and a landlord in this scenario would have the ability to contact the eviction continuum clearinghouse, the court system partnership with the city and the county on their own. So then that landlord who is sitting with no resources, multiple units behind in rent, could help keep that person off the street and get a large settlement of dollars that come from the federal government, just like the CARES Act put out money for unemployment, and the federal government, in my opinion, did the right thing by putting trillions of dollars onto the street for those who were unemployed. The same thing has to happen. 100 billion, maybe 150 billion has to go to cities and counties who then create a system to get that money to landlords, like you're talking about here, Mike, so then these tenants can stay off the streets. But boy, we could also, with those resources, avoid another mortgage crisis. Because did you know that 1 in 4 evictions, 1 in 4 evictions that happened in 2008, 2010, during the 2008 crisis, was because of a foreclosure. So if these landlords start getting foreclosed upon, these people are going to get evicted anyways. And so, Mike, great question, but we need to get money to landlords, but your community has to be the arbiter of that. Again, someone's asking, how do I get into the 9-week program? There's a form on the website. We are going to coach you. We want to coach you from September 2nd to October 28th. Why are you doing it so quickly? Because I'm telling you, the numbers that we see right now are the scary. I've done this work. I got 2 minutes left. I'm going to get you out of here. But I've done this work on helping communities with homelessness for over a decade. Every person that's homeless, whenever that happens, is a tragedy, and every person in need matters. I will tell you though, for those of you that work on this issue every day, or for mayors, county leaders, judges, and others who, leadership, this is what you do. You lead. You're a public servant. This is the moment that will define your community and maybe your leadership, this COVID-19 crisis. And the eviction crisis now that is coming. There was a question a few months ago, is it coming? There's no question now. There's an eviction crisis coming to your community. But you, mayor, county leader, judge, business leader, sheriff, United Ways, continuums of care, you can come together to make a solution for those in need. And if you don't, I'm telling you, there's such a crisis coming to your community. But with federal resources, we got to lobby for those. And your community with the right mindset, the right system, the right targeting, the right collaboration, you can absolutely build an ark, if you will, and put those who are facing eviction in that boat so that they can weather the storm. If you're wanting more information on the 9-week program, go to rethinkinghomelessness.org. You can /9week. You can contact our staff if you need more information. Again, the 9-week program starts September 2nd, ends October 28th. Hit us up with questions. With lots of questions in the chat box. We're going to be getting this link out to you so you can watch this. You can send it to those that weren't able to make it. Leaders, thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for helping so many families in need in your community. And we're here to help you. email us. Take a second, right as soon as this webinar is done. Email us about the 9-week program. We want to get you involved in it. Thank you so much. God bless. We'll talk to you soon.